Rocket Lab aborts a launch. More satellites head into space. NASA has some explaining to do, and this week we say goodbye to one of space flight's workhorses. All of that and much more on this episode of Orbit Weekly. So we're going to start this episode a little bit different than we normally do, because normally when I want to start, we are going to do SpaceX, Blue Origin, all stuff like that. This isn't particularly a story about them, but it's something having to... It has implications for them. So we aren't going to start with something from this week, but technically it was last week. Post-recording, this came out. Having a program canceled is nothing new. Either it's over budget, it's taking too long, materials won't meet deadlines. It could be anything. And I don't know. I don't want to be political. I really don't. Actually, I don't want to go there at all. But because this spanned over so many years, this is something that you can't really be political about. So I want to just address that first. It's regardless of the administration at the time, because this issue goes back at least 20 years. But this report came out this week, previous week, but in that report, in 2019, NASA contracted out the framework for the Gateway program. So the Gateway program was pretty much the International Space Station around the moon. And this was what Artemis was going to go and dock to. It could have let us go to the moon for longer while we built the moon base there. But a new report released this week, we learned that the project had been canceled. And it was canceled because it was supposed to be ready in 2021. And yes, COVID did have a small part to do with it, but it doesn't change the fact that it was canceled this week. When it was canceled this week, it was projected to be 300% more costly than the contract amount that they were awarded. So why does this happen? NASA, of course. So NASA likes to change mission criteria while they're building something. So let's say, for example, because this did happen, NASA contracts out the building of the Halo. The Halo module. This would have been like the habitation module for the Gateway. So they contract that out. It starts getting built in Italy, I believe. I want to say Italy. It gets built in Italy, and it sits on a shelf. NASA loses funding for it. There isn't really that good amount of a timeline. NASA's budget gets slashed all the time, to a point where it's laughably small, given the things that they are still able to pull off. It is laughably small. If you think about the NASA budget as $1, and then you cut off 4/100ths of that dollar, that is how much NASA is getting. So it puts into perspective, NASA doesn't really have this kind of money just laying around to just buy things and stuff like that. And it kind of shows with the programs that they do, because when they commit themselves to something, they are 70% committing themselves to something. And it obviously takes time for stuff to get built. So going back to the Halo module gets built. It's pretty much ready to get certified to fly. It was going to fly on, I think, Falcon Heavy. That was going to fly it. So everything was pretty much set. Project gets canceled. They find that because it's been in storage so long that it's starting to rust. So NASA doesn't want anything to do with it, and they cancel it. So, but in the report, they note that this project changed criteria 5 times. 5 different versions of what the people were told of building the thing. That's pretty crazy to think about. So that was just one project that was canceled this week. There were a couple others as well. You might have to wait till next week because we can maybe go into a deep dive on this. But I think it is time, though, that we talk about an interesting finding out at Lagrange 2. So, usually segment 2 is stuff that has nothing to do with NASA, has nothing to do with America, and I made an exemption once again for this, is because the James Webb Space Telescope is doing something interesting again this week. And because the Webb Telescope is not only run by NASA, it's run by ESA, so we will take that as a technicality. Anyways, it has found a planet, an exoplanet, about the size of Jupiter, orbiting a dead star. So, the planet in question was exoplanet WD 1856b, and it was measuring the temperature as it made its orbit. It was originally located by TESS. Now, TESS is the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite. It's basically a survey telescope kind of thing. And the Spitzer Space Telescope that was launched a long time ago. That was the pretty much the it was, I'm pretty sure it was Hubble, Spitzer, Webb, and then Roman later on this year. But anyways, the object orbits a white dwarf star 50 times closer to the Earth than it is to the Sun. So think of how close we are to the Sun. Okay. Now, think of Jupiter pretty much orbiting a star where Mercury is. Just to put that in kind of, the math isn't quite there, but like it is way closer than we are to our sun. Anyways, Webb tried to see the planet and the star in infrared, but found that the planet was giving off more thermo energy than the star was, which made it very difficult to track. But they concluded that that other stars in that system influence the planet's orbit rather than the host star. So 1856b is in a system with 3 stars in it compared to our solar system that only has 1. And researchers found that there were no source of energy present to generate heat today. So it must be residual energy from earlier times when the planet was actually heated. So not only in this in this discovery, not only we have found a planet orbiting a dead star, its orbit is being changed, quote unquote, changed, not really changed, maintained is probably a better word, maintained by two other stars, nearby stars, that are pretty much having their gravity equal out to orbit this dead star. And the planet, and we figured out finding the planet, the exoplanet, is not only orbiting a dead star, but it's not giving off any kind of like heat signature that Webb can track. It's giving off something a little bit different. So we are definitely going to be keeping our eye on this story, and see if it develops and how it develops. But I think it's time, because we are not really done talking about NASA, because we're going to talk more about more NASA and another event that happened this week. All right, this week, on Tuesday, NASA did a press conference about 3 companies that are going to be doing landers. So, excuse me, I have my notes over here. But NASA announced initial steps towards the moon base during its ignition event back in March 2026. These landers included the CLPS initiative, which is the Commercial Lunar Payload Services. They were reclassified as the Moon Base program. The 3 were Blue Moon Mark 1, which is Blue Origins, Astrobotics Griffin 1, and Intuitive Machines' Nova Sea lander will make up the first 3 moon-based missions. They are going to prove the required capabilities for landing on the lunar surface and have been described as the backbone of the program. So, we have seen, the interesting thing is we haven't seen Astrobotic land on the moon yet. To my knowledge, we haven't seen them. I could be completely wrong. We have seen, rather hilariously, Intuitive Machines attempt to land on the moon. I'm pretty sure that they have gone twice, and I think they need to, personally, I think they need to go back to the drawing board if they're going to launch pretty much a stand-up mini fridge. Because both times that it's gone, it's fallen over when it's landing. So either something isn't going right, or you might want to change the landing legs. Personal opinion. Obviously, you don't need to listen to me. But the other one that pretty much flew picture perfect was Blue Ghost. That one is Fireflies. So it's very interesting. There's this one article I'm looking at, and it goes into everything. The thing that is going to be very interesting, at least for these missions, is with the agency already securing 17 lander contracts across multiple companies, NASA's intention is to prove the essential hardware in preparation for later moon-based missions. Future Phase 1 missions include the delivery of the Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration Rover, that was also known as Viper, which was technically canceled 2 years ago. Because it kept slipping in, it kept missing launch dates, so they didn't want it, they weren't going to launch it. NASA is also committed to sending astronauts to the moon to stay by early 2030 under its Artemis initiative, pretty much from Artemis 4 onwards. The interesting thing is that we are getting to see landers like this. But for Artemis 3, Orion, the NASA capsule, is going to dock with the Blue Origin lander and the HLS Starship. Now, we've seen renders of this Blue Origin lander. It does have a crew module in it, so they'll be able to go in and do science and report back on what they find and how it's going. We haven't seen anything from SpaceX, and obviously it is their IPO, their intellectual property. Maybe they don't want to play all their cards yet, and that's totally up to them. But from what we're reading here, it doesn't sound like it so far. When Starship is launched, it has not done an orbital flight yet. It has done a handful of different version flights, meaning there was version 1, version 2, we're currently on version 3. We are pretty sure, in terms of Artemis, that they're probably just going to glue a docking adapter on the side of a version 3. And at that point, it's going to have to be orbital, because they can't just put it up there for 20 minutes, have them docked to it. They're supposed to be docked to it for at least a day. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how they do that. They also need a place to bring it back down, and they've only been pretty much dumping them in the in the ocean between Australia and India, the Indian Sea there. So I look forward to what they do, but I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to think about it. So, from being hesitant, we're going to move on to a look back on some of the interesting things, because we're about to have a funeral. We're about to have a funeral for one of the ULA's, United Launch Alliance, workhorses over the past 20 years. So normally this section would be This Week in Space Traffic, but we're going to have a funeral for the ULA Atlas, an Atlas 5. Pretty sure it's the 551. It is the 551. So, this is the Atlas 5, right here. It's a very interesting design. Huge fairing up at the top. And then it had pretty much a giant stick as the first stage, and then it had side SRBs, solid rocket motors, on the sides. Very, very common look for a rocket. But this rocket debuted in August of 2002. And Atlas V has launched in this configuration, or close to this configuration, 109 times, with a 99.5% success rate. So we're going to go through a few launches, quite a couple of launches. There's at least 4 missions that I know really anybody's ever heard of. One mission died last week. But maybe you know more about Atlas than you think you do. So, Atlas first launched on August 21st, 2002 with Hotbird 6. It was a French communication satellite. This was by Kinéis. And it was pretty much a TV satellite, pretty much what it was. And then we're just gonna hit all of the ones that either you might know, you might have kind of heard of before. If you follow basic space news, or you follow NASA at all on any kind of social media or anything like that, you've definitely heard of some of these before. Um, August 12th, 2005, Atlas launched the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, um, and it was meant to do climate observations, finding future landing sites, uh, and it is data relay capable. And so far, it's transmitted, because it's still going. As of this recording, it has transmitted over 445 terabytes of data about Mars, which is insane. That is so much information. Um, One that you might is currently flying right now, and we're still communicating with it. Launched on January 19th, 2006, and that was New Horizons. And New Horizons launched as a part of the NASA's New Frontiers program, and it captured high-resolution images of Pluto and its moons. Rest in peace, Pluto. Another one you probably heard of. We're getting into ones that you've probably heard of at this point. August 5th, 2011, it launched Juno. Juno included an infrared and microwave instrument detecting thermal radiation in Jupiter's atmosphere. It's that one that's like the three-pointed one with its solar rays, and it spins. And it spins all around Jupiter. All the way around. On November 26th, 2011, this was a few months after Juno, Atlas V launched Curiosity. Curiosity is a robotic rover that was sent to Mars. It runs on nuclear power. Was sent to Mars to investigate habitability, climate, and geology. One you probably haven't heard of is the Van Allen probes. Those were launched in August, the end of August, in 2012. There were 2 robotic spacecraft sent to study the Van Allen radiation belt that surrounds Earth. So that's like your North Pole, South Pole kind of thing. Then we get to the spacecraft that died last week. Well, not died. Was told it did a good job, and we said goodnight to it, pretty much. November 18th, 2023, so kind of a big jump there. Maven. Maven was a Mars atmospheric and volatile evolution orbiter. It was developed to learn about the Martian atmosphere while orbiting Mars, and it was recently retired. Now we're getting into ones that good chance you probably heard of. In September 8th, 2016, OSIRIS-REx. This was the NASA study, the NASA mission to go to Bennu, the asteroid, where it returned asteroid material back to Earth, and is now currently roaming the solar system for its next target. May 5th, 2018, we're heading back to Mars, and this was for InSight, a robotic lander to study the interior of Mars. Mission ended last year, in 2025, after the solar rays were covered in Martian dust. Then we're going to get to a little bit of a project, because they've launched 3 of them, but it wasn't technically in this configuration, but they still used... It was still the same configuration, but there was no fairing, so I didn't want to include it, but it was kind of launched that way, so it is what it is. And it was Starliner. So Starliner had 2 flight tests and a crew test, and all of them went badly. Um, that was the mission with Butch and Sonny that had to stay on the International Space Station, and Starliner was sent home on its own. Um, so that was pretty interesting. Um, February 9th, 2020, the Solar Orbiter. It's a sun-observing satellite operated by the European Space Agency, and it's performing measurements of the sun's heliosphere. Here's one that you probably do know, and do know very well. July 30th, 2020, so a few months after, was Perseverance. The nuclear Martian rover that is trying to find ancient life. And currently, if you look at some of the things that it has found, it's finding some cool stuff. And the last one, as of stuff that you might or might not know, October 16th, 2021, was Lucy. And Lucy was launched to visit Jupiter's Trojan asteroids. And Trojan asteroids at Jupiter are not that big, but they share the same orbit that Jupiter does. So they are spread out enough that they're influenced by Jupiter, but they don't orbit Jupiter. They orbit the sun. So Lucy was sent to go find that. So I guess you could say that Atlas V did a lot of very cool things. It gave us a lot of science. Usually you don't get emotional about a rocket, but some space people do. Technically, we had another one retire this week, and that was Pegasus XL. That they launched that from the underside of a plane, and we'll talk about that. We'll show you a bit of a clip from that. That was pretty cool. Coming up next in This Week in Space Traffic. There were a lot of launches this week, so there are plenty of things to go through. So we are going to start with Rocket Lab and Electron, and on June 26th at 1:43 Eastern Time, p.m. Eastern Time, the 10 Owl of 10 mission was launched. This is a data collection satellite, well, one of many data collection satellites that can see the ground, like the actual ground, in 1 to 3 meters in resolution. So that is insane for pictures. The next two that we saw came on the same day. We saw Starlink 17-40. This launched on 6:20 at June 28th at 12:09 p.m. From Vandenberg, Slick 4 East. This was booster 1088, and it landed on Of Course I Still Love You. And it was carrying Starlink V2 mini satellites. Then we also had another launch from SpaceX on the same day, about 10 hours later. This was the Sirius XM satellite. Sirius XM 11 launched at 10:25 p.m. Eastern Time. This was booster 1085, and it landed on a shortfall of gravitas. Launched from Slick 40. And then we had another Starlink launch a few days later, July 1st, at 10:58 p.m. Eastern Time, with booster 1100. And this was from Vandenberg, again, Slick 4E. and it landed on, of course, I Still Love You, again. And this was Starlink V2 minis, again. And then we got a launch out of China at 7:46 p.m. the same day, so a little bit earlier. We had the Haiyang 2E. Now, this was a remote marine remote sensing satellite, so take that for what you will. But this was launched on a Long March 4B from Site 94 in China. Let's see, what else do we have? We have Amazon Leo. That was our Atlas V 551 that was launched from Slick 41. And that was the Amazon Leo satellites. Pretty much the same as Starlink, but they're just owned by Amazon instead. And then our last launch of the week came on July 3rd at 4:36 a.m. And this was the Pegasus XL Northrop plane. And this took off from Ronald Reagan Ballistic Missile Defense Site in the Marshall Islands. And this was the Swift Boost mission. This was what we talked about last week when the one company built a spacecraft to boost the Swift Observatory in space. So, we are hoping that this works, because if this does, NASA could possibly use it to maybe boost Hubble. It's a wild take. It's a wild take, but there's no way that you cannot consider that. That would be really interesting if that was a thing. But let's focus on next time. Well, that is it for this week's update. Join me next time when we talk about maybe Swift. We'll see what happens. It is, by the time this episode comes out, it'll be July 5th, so America, happy birthday. 250 never looked so great. We'll talk about all of the things that we saw in regards to NASA and the 250th anniversary. That'll be some interesting stuff. They've already posted a few things as well. Maybe we'll have an update on Blue's launch pad. Maybe we'll have an update on Starbase. Who knows? We'll see about that. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I enjoyed making it. And as always, Ad Astra.